Hey everyone, we are starting into our next unit of looking at the executive branch, which is Article 2 in the Constitution, and it outlines the roles and responsibilities of our president. How do they get there? How do you need to apply to get there? All of those things. So, jumping right into it, taking a look at some of our basics. Okay, like I just said, Article 2 is where we see the outline of the presidency and what all goes into this job. Okay, so based out of Article 2, we know a couple of specific things. Executive power is vested in a single president. That person is going to hold their term for 4 consecutive years. They are also voted in along with the vice president. Just a side note, early on in the creation of our country and during our starting years, the president and vice president were actually not elected on the same ticket. So how it would work is that you would have a person run as an individual, and first place would become president and second place would become vice president. And so most of the time you had different parties that were running your executive branch because most likely your president and vice president were of 2 different parties. This wasn't changed until later when they ended up making an amendment to the Constitution so that way both the president and vice president were of the same party. Presidents are elected based on state-chosen electors. Okay, so we are kind of experiencing this in our world right now. With this being recorded in November of 2020, basically what happens, and it's kind of different per state, because, right, state rights, they get to choose how they do elections. What I can tell you is that how it works in Michigan is that the party that is in control of the state legislature, they are going to choose who the electors are. Okay, so our state legislature is choosing those electors. Electors can be anyone of voting age. Could be your next door neighbor, could be a teacher, could be someone who runs a business, could be a grandma, okay? But these electors are the ones who really end up choosing our president. They most of the time are using the popular vote as data to then determine how they want to vote or cast their vote. We're going to get into the Electoral College a little bit later here in this unit, but that's just kind of briefly what's going on here with our electors. A president shall receive compensation during their term in office. So how do you get to run? Well, you have to be a natural born citizen. Okay, so you're born on U.S. soil, U.S. territories, as well as military bases do count as being born a U.S. citizen. Okay, so take, for example, my sister-in-law, Jessie. She was born in Germany on a military base. She is a born U.S. citizen. Even though she was born in the country of Germany, she was born on that U.S. soil. Same could be for any other person who is in that similar situation. You need to be 35 years of age. Okay, so you can always kind of remember the age requirements between the president, a representative, and senator because they're always going to be 5 years apart. Okay, so to be a president, you have to be 35 years of age, a senator, 30 years of age, and a representative, 25 years of age. And you need to have lived in the United States for 14 years. Okay, so you were born in the U.S., maybe your family then moves to England or India, and then you return back home or back to the United States as an adult. You have to live here for 14 years, and then you can run for president. So what are some of those specific powers outlined in the Constitution? Well, the president is commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy, all armed forces. So they are like the top commander. They are organizing where people go, when people go, how funds are allocated to the different armed forces branches, giving some of those top directives of movements of troops, when to activate troops, things like that. The president has the power to grant pardons. Okay, so a pardon is when a person has their criminal record erased or they're forgiven of their crimes. The president is also going to be able to make treaties with other countries with the official sign-off from the Senate, and appoint ambassadors, public ministers and consuls, judges of the Supreme Court, and all other officers of the United States, again with that Senate approval. Okay, so here at the bottom right of the screen here, we have the most recent nomination by President Trump for Amy Barrett, and she was confirmed by the Senate, and she is now in our Supreme Court. So what, again, is the president supposed to do? Like, yeah, they have these roles, but like, what do they have to do? Constitutionally, from time to time, they have to give updates to Congress on the state of the union. Typically, this is given by presidents usually in January through March. It's a once a year, usually, kind of event where the president will come forth and say what is their agenda, what are their goals, what do they see what's happening going on within the country, what do they want Congress to do with them, all of these different things. It's basically an update for Congress and kind of the nation at this point. We also have this process of impeachment that is outlined in Article 2 of the Constitution. We covered this pretty well when we talked about Congress and their powers, but just know that, again, we're tying it back to some of those checks and balances between the executive branch and the legislative branch. When we have impeachment, okay, so this is what's constitutionally written down, a president shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Treason is when you have actively worked against the nation. Okay, so you're working kind of either as a terrorist or you are working with another country in order to create the downfall of the United States. Bribery is when you've taken money in return for a favor. And then other high crimes and misdemeanors. That end of the sentence creates this very wide gray area and is typically what is used when we see someone being called for being impeached. As far as expectations go, when we look at the office of presidency, it's pretty much impossible to make everyone happy. Okay? And that's just something to know in the real world too, is that you can never make anyone happy. And the president experiences the same things, only now on a national level. Okay, so if you take a look at the right here, we see the highs and the lows of presidential approval, all the way from Eisenhower up to Obama. So across the kind of middle portion there, we see the data where the top portion shows the highest point of approval across the nation and then their lowest point of approval. And we have a dotted line showing 0, 50%, and 100% approval. Within the last 60 years or so, our highest approval rating was George H.W. Bush. Okay, so he is the more senior Bush. He had an approval rating at one point of 89%, while he also had one of the lower approval ratings of 29%. Okay, so that's very common to end up starting out with a higher percent and then ending up over your presidency with a lower percentage point. And it's interesting to see too, the bottom of this image here that you see, the boxes that are around the pictures of the presidents, they are outlined in the color of the party that they were nominated from. So Eisenhower was Republican, Kennedy, Democrat, Johnson, Democrat, Nixon, Republican, and so forth. So this expectation of what is a president supposed to do, it's been a debate ever since even the creation of our Constitution. Our founding fathers knew what they were doing. They wanted to have a strong, united leader so that way they could make quick actions, decisions if necessary, right? It's one person versus 400 making a decision. That's going to take a little bit longer. They needed to have some type of system in place where if we're getting attacked, maybe as a country on soil, we need to be able to respond immediately and not have to work through hundreds of people. But on the other side, we also don't want to have a dictator, right? We just had broken away from the King of England, who was abusive, tyrannical, and so we wanted to have these different checks and balances on this person in power. So, what are some of those checks and balances? Okay, well, obviously we have impeachment, which we talked about earlier, but then as we go forward, we see some different amendments or changes that occur in order to keep the role of presidency controlled. So the first one let's get into is the 22nd Amendment. This was passed following the death of FDR, who ran for 3 terms. Okay, so he was in the presidency for 3 terms. Now, after he passed, Congress was considering, was that too long? Should we put a term limit on how long someone can serve as our president? So this is when we get our 22nd Amendment passed, and this limits the president to 2 terms only. Okay, so fun fact, a person can be president, though, for up to 10 years. Now, let's do some math. How long is a term? 4 years. And they can serve up to 2 terms. That should equal 8 years. So how would someone be able to serve for 10 years? Well, it's actually because if someone started out as vice president and then needed to step up into the presidential role, maybe because their predecessor passed away or was removed from office or stepped down, that vice president is going to serve out the rest of their predecessor's years. But then they can still run for 2 terms. Okay, so that's how we get up to 10 years in office. Just some interesting moments there for you. We know that we can remove someone that we are concerned about by the process of impeachment. Okay, up to this point in time, we have had 3 presidents that have been impeached. None have been removed from office. So our 3 presidents that have been impeached is Andrew Johnson, who served after Lincoln. He was impeached because the North was upset with him for pardoning the entire South after the Civil War. After that, we have Bill Clinton, who was impeached in the 90s for lying to investigators, concerns about that. And then more recently, we have our current President Trump, who was impeached as well. No one has ever been removed from office, though. Just as a refresher, reminder, impeachment starts in the House of Reps, where they're going to introduce articles of impeachment. They're going to look at all of the evidence and data and determine, is there enough evidence here to go to trial? If they say yes, then a trial is going to occur in the Senate. And all senators basically act as a jury, where they're going to listen to both sides' defense and the prosecutors, listen to all the evidence, the witnesses, and then take a vote. And that determines whether someone is going to be removed or not. Now, the Senate is going to also determine their punishment. So technically, a president could be impeached and convicted of a crime, but not removed from office. Okay? And just so we can make sure to have all 3 branches of government involved in this process, we have our Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that is going to oversee the trial as the judge. So what happens if a president can't serve? Again, maybe someone's passed away, they step down, or they are impeached. Well, this is where we introduce our 25th Amendment. Okay, our 25th Amendment sets up a line of succession for if the president needs to step down or is no longer able to serve. It allows the vice president to take over office until either the president can return or the term finishes. Okay, so some of the basic first 4, we have our vice president who would come up first. After the vice president would be Speaker of the House, then President pro tempore, then Secretary of State. Okay, and there's a whole list, as you can see here on the right, of the order of how people would be bumped up to the position of presidency. Now, not sure if you guys have Netflix or not, but if you do, there is a show called Designated Survivor. And this show took over the premise of the fact of, and it is a true fact that when there's like a State of the Union or a major cabinet meeting where most members of the president's cabinet, like the members off to the right here on this chart, if they are all coming together, there's going to be one person who goes to an undisclosed location and is protected, just in case there is like an assassination attempt or a bombing, natural disaster, whatever it is, that knocks out this list of people to succeed to be president. There's going to be at least one person left to step up as that person. So I'm actually going to attach a clip of the opening for Designated Survivor just to give you an idea of what this kind of looks like. And then, yeah, it's a really good show. Highly recommend you guys take a watch at it. So here's some questions that I would like you to answer for today. There's going to be a separate document for you to open up, not a discussion board, but a Word document. And I want you to answer these two questions. In your opinion, has the office of president become too powerful for the nation's own good? Now, I ask that when you answer this, you're thinking of the role of presidency, you're thinking of the executive branch. I don't want to hear about how you don't like someone as president. Please do not give me individuals' names, people in office. I really don't want to hear that. Unfortunately, it's not a part of the course. Instead, we are critiquing the role, procedures, operations of the position. Okay? Is that fair? Hopefully you said yes to that. Secondly, I want you to consider what are 5 characteristics of a good president. Okay, so when we think about leadership roles, about someone who we want to be in charge of this country, what does that person, what are their characteristics? What do they act like? What do they think like? Are they educated? Do they have to have certain years of education? Is there a medical record? Do they need certain experience? And again, this is totally your opinion because you have literally just seen all of the qualifications that go into being a president and running for president. So consider, what makes a good president to you? And then you're going to explain your different characteristics. If you guys have any questions, please make sure to reach out to me. I am happy to talk through whatever's going on. See you guys later.